You're on, Sister Tulia.
Good evening, ladies, and welcome to another Thursday meeting of Kingdom Women of Influence. And we're going to be continuing on the theme that Sister Charmaine began in February of the newness. And if we remember the scripture the scriptures that Sister Charmaine referred to was the scripture in Isaiah 43 and verse 19. And we read, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." And I do remember Sister Charmaine stressing on us and our wilderness. Because if we are going to remain in that place of wilderness, ladies, it means we're not moving on. It means that we're not well connected with the Lord. We're not listening. And we are missing out because He is making streams, He's making rivers flow through the wastelands, through those wildernesses. And we need to make sure that we are benefiting from those streams, that we are trees planted along the side of those streams. So with that said, we are here, and you can see our sister Jackie's there. Let me allow Jackie to say a quick hello.
Good evening, ladies. So lovely to be here with you all. And I know you're going to enjoy this evening's discourse and our special guest.
Yes, yes. So we're in the month of March. Now, I like March. It's a special, very special month because somebody has a birthday in March. And also, March kind of, not so much for us here in the Caribbean, but in the cooler, more temperate climates, March sort of brings in spring. And spring is a time of rebirth and new beginnings. It's a time of newness also. So for the month of March, though, we really felt that we needed to focus on us as women. So we are going to be talking through Proverbs 31, and we're all quite familiar with that. In particular, we know that the Kingdom Women of Influence, we know that our foundation scriptures are Proverbs 31 and verses 25 to 27. So, Sister Jackie, do you think you could just read that for us quickly, please?
Sure. Just a second. Let me pull it up. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness.
Amen. Now, we've purposefully chosen to read just our foundation scriptures today because we have a special guest. You've probably alluded to her already, but we have a special guest this afternoon, and we likened her to a biblical character because our foundation scriptures highlighted these values, these characteristics, that she's strong, she's dignified, she's optimistic, she's wise, she's faithful, she cares for her family and for her people, she's fair and just, she's brave, and she knows how to prioritize. And Sister Jackie, the person that comes to mind, we discussed it earlier, is Deborah. So just a little bit on Deborah, and then we can introduce our special guest.
Certainly. Deborah was actually the only female judge of Israel. She was a prophetess during that period, just after the Israelites entered into the promised land. And from Moses, who had appointed judges over the people of Israel, they continued in that line. And so whenever there was a judge, the people were actually serving God. And under Deborah, it was no exception. She was a woman of great character, which is why we thought of her looking at these verses from the book of Proverbs, chapter 31. She was also an advisor and a wise counselor for her people. She had a compassionate zeal for justice. And not only that, she looked to God for all of her answers. So whether she was a judge or a wife, she was looking to the Lord. So when she was called on to lead, she stepped up bravely to accomplish what even the commander of the Israelite army was afraid to do. And he said to her that, if you come with me, I will go into battle. But if you're not coming, I won't go. She said, I will go. So Deborah was a woman of great faith and influenced her people to live for God, which we saw in the book of Judges. And because of her great faith in God, the Israelites won the day, and they routed the Canaanites who had come against them. So more on that after our guest. Let me allow Sister Tulia to introduce her.
Okay, thank you, Sister Jacquie. So yes, so we've just looked at the characteristics of this virtuous woman from Proverbs 25 to 27. And Deborah being a strong woman in the time, as Sister Jacquie just said, where only men were leaders and only men could be judges. And this woman, strong, brave woman, could stand up in a men's world, so to speak, and hold her own. So, with no further ado, I will introduce our special guest, Dr. Alicia Eugene Ford. Many of us know her. She's the medical director of Owen King EU Hospital and Victoria Hospital and the Millennium Complex, etc., etc. So, Dr. Eugene Ford, over to you and welcome.
Thank you, Sister Tulia and other Kiwi sisters. I thank you so very much. I'm wondering why you choose Deborah, because my middle name is actually Deborah as well.
There you go.
So, and of course, it's always good when we have persons or women in the Bible that we can look up to. You know, we can go and see that they had hard times and they had difficult times, even more difficult than what we're going through now. And they stood up. They stood up. So I think it's always good when we can actually pull persons from the Bible that we think were God-fearing women, and we can do the needful to follow them. I was asked by my fellow Kiwi leader, that is Sister Tulia, to speak about my COVID experience as a frontliner, you know. And one of the things I want to say is that this COVID-19 experience, or this pandemic, you don't really see it. Not many physicians have the opportunity to go through a pandemic as we're doing right now. I think the last pandemic was 100 years ago, the Spanish flu, and it has now gone 100 years, and now we have COVID-19. I'll go back and just, I have a lot to go through, but I think I will just go through it in such a way that you remember and persons can be guided and along. I guess afterward, if anybody have any questions, I will do the necessaries to try to clarify any doubts, etc. Okay, so we all knew before that our general hospital was the Victoria Hospital. And we had not moved to the Owen King European Union Hospital as yet. We were still at the Victoria Hospital when we started receiving our first suspect case of COVID-19. And that would have been in February of 2020. That is February of last year. We started receiving our first suspect case, who was a foreigner. He came in, and then we suspected, not well suspect, there's a difference between a suspect case and a case that's actually positive, okay? At that point, we had already, since from the year before, 2019, we were already aware that we had persons, we had what you call a pandemic, which the World Health Organization had classified or had described as a public health emergency of international concern. So therefore, from 2019, we had already sat at the level of the Ministry of Health with the different departments under health, and we decided, let us plan for this pandemic, because one day it's going to hit our shores. As safe and sweet as St. Lucia is, we know one day we're going to get COVID. So from 2019, we were planning, and then we started having what looked like the first suspect case to us in February of 2020. Of course, we hadn't moved yet from VH into OKUH, and we were using our chest wing, where we housed TB cases. We only had 2 TB cases at that point. So what we did, we could have discharged one, and the other one we sent down to Soufriere Hospital. It was actually from Soufriere. So it worked out perfectly during that time so that we can actually house the suspect cases as they came in. And they came in, we had persons coming in. And of course, imagine the panic that arose, because people were hearing on the media, international media, about COVID. And now you have a patient with a suspect COVID. You have to put on your PPE, and persons were putting up cameras, because you remember, it's new. So we had persons putting up cameras. It just happened that this gentleman who came in as a suspect came during around visiting hours. So you can imagine we had family members out, persons were pulling up cameras. And because of the layout of the facility, when we had to get an x-ray done for him, we actually had to bring him up the hill so you could know. Everybody was just taking out pictures, making a fuss. But, that is when you realize that, hey, something is happening, and now we have to be ready for this. We had to split our physicians, because obviously we didn't want the physicians that are taking care of COVID-19 suspect cases or positive cases to be the same ones taking care of persons that were not related to COVID at all. So that was a bit difficult, because as you know, human resources for healthcare workers is always an issue for us. So to have separate staff, we had to literally reach out, and it couldn't be a Victoria Hospital issue. It was a national issue. So we reached out for our counterparts in primary healthcare. We reached out to St. Jude's. We tried our best to get persons, but I must admit the fear was there. So even the healthcare workers were a bit, you could have noticed the fear, and they were not really coming in. You can't really, and we couldn't really force persons. We had to look at a lot of different things, and we realized that only a few persons were actually wanting to come to deliver the COVID-19 suspect cases that were coming in. And this was quite a thing for us, because we found out as time went, we started asking, but it's a national event. It's something national. Why are we splitting? Why can't we get staff? People were the staff who just didn't want to come in. And so you hear that very much when it comes to managing, you have to work with persons, and sometimes you want persons to come in and assist, but persons will have, some of them will tell you they have comorbidities, they're asthmatic, they have other issues, and family members, and it was difficult to have persons come on board who work with COVID-19, seeing everything that was happening around the world with COVID-19. But it came to the point that we had to move. Victoria Hospital had to move to OKUH, because we realized with time we need more space to put our COVID-19 cases. So then we had to move, and we had to do an immediate move. We had plans way beforehand that when we're going to move, we're going to involve other countries like Martinique. We bring in other persons to assist. But guess what? With COVID-19 and all countries being strapped down, we were on our own. You need to move the hospital on your own, because we cannot bring in foreigners in to assist you, because all foreigners are strapped down taking care of their own country. So we had to sit and deal with our own internal human resource at St. Lucia and see what we could do to move the hospital. So we started tapering down our cases. Of course, what we did, we started planning by bringing in the different players on board and giving them an update, training them and telling them what we have to do. We're going to do table up. We're going to do whatever we're going to do. We need to do it, and we need to do it fast. It was quite interesting, though, that sometimes when you're when you think you hit rock bottom, that's when you realize how much resources you have and how many things could be done. So With all of this, we decided to use our own internal resources, and we started taking down our numbers to realize that we started stopping elective surgery. We started only doing emergency surgeries. We started redirecting persons who don't have to be in the hospital to start going to primary health care. We asked Castries Health Center to prolong hours of service so that persons don't come to the hospital. We sent out public awareness, public service announcements so that persons know you don't come to the hospital. And it was in these moves, these are the steps we did, that we allowed our numbers of patients that were in the hospitals to come down to such a low number that our inpatient status gone down really low numbers. So it would have been easier for us to move patients. And we had to move patients in cycles and teams, critical places, we had to move them together so that we had team 1, team 2. It was so much practice, but at the same time, the dynamics, I think it was a lot of teamwork. I had a great nursing director on board. I had a great operation manager on board. I had a great ED on board. So we had a great team. And because of the team, we were able to move all these patients we had that needed to be in hospital, and we had not one single death. We didn't have any death. I think we had somebody, that person who, that child who passed away afterwards, after we moved. We didn't really expect the child to live so long because the child was doing so badly. But it was not, we deduced that it wasn't because of the move the child passed away. It was just that it was that time where the child had to go. We actually thought he would not have lived so long with these comorbidities, but he did. And then thankfully, God in control, we had no accidents, we had no incidents, and we safely moved from one hospital to the other. But simultaneously, the management had to open respiratory hospital. So what happened is, as we moved our last case at 5:11 p.m. on the 27th of March of last year, simultaneously we opened the respiratory hospital. So VH became the respiratory hospital, and we had already advised the public that everybody with respiratory symptoms had to move to that hospital. And that is why, the reason why we did that, because we didn't want to mix individuals with COVID with individuals who were not COVID, with non-COVID related cases. Of course, we had to do our screening and everything else simply because we realized that persons didn't want to come to the old hospital and persons wanted to come to the new hospital. So whether they had respiratory symptoms or not, they didn't listen to what the news was saying. They just wanted to come to the new hospital. Everybody wanted to take pictures. Everybody wanted to come. And guess what? At the same time, management had to say, no, we have to have a plan. So if you come to OK, we need to redirect you. So that is when we started engaging Red Cross even further to help us to go across. We had to have our gates had to be strengthened on both ends of the hospital. And of course, we had to split our staff. Our Cuban counterparts came down, but when persons come down, they can't just start working right away. You need to get registered and you need to get the orientation. So they came along a little afterwards. I think the day after we moved, we landed. And then it took about 2 weeks for them to come on board for us to be able to have more staff. But as time went, we realized that, we had 2 facilities running. We had OKUH, we had Victoria Hospital as the management. I'm not talking about myself as also clinical lead of the mental wellness center. But what happened is that we had to run 2 hospitals, the respiratory hospital and the OKUH hospital simultaneously. Okay, so, and we had to make sure that we had all what we needed, and we realized resources started coming in, and we started seeing that 2 hospitals, more resources. Thankfully, the first wave, persons were not very ill. So the first wave of COVID, we found that a lot of the patients were asymptomatic or they had mild symptoms. So we didn't have any community spread as yet. So what we did, we tried to isolate these individuals. We had them come in when you were positive, and we brought you into the hospital. So the hospital was really an isolation facility in the first wave. Despite the fact that you may not have been sick at all, you may have been asymptomatic, but we kept you in there. And we started seeing a lot of issues. Persons were complaining, persons started to go on the media, people were making videos, they were upset. How dare you keep me in a hospital and I don't feel sick? I have COVID, are you sure? And we had a lot of persons complaining, and the media was on us, and oh my God, the family pressure. Persons just didn't want to come to the hospital. But we were really trying to avoid community spread. Yeah, and we realized persons were making demand. I want water, I want tissue, I want a lot of stuff. And we said to ourselves, this was coming too much resources were being asked for. When in reality, in the general hospital, persons would not come to the hospital and ask for water, tissue, soap, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we realized we needed to do a brochure to inform family members and also send out what you call a public awareness or public service announcement, informing everybody via the media that these are the things you need to bring in when you come into the respiratory hospital. And we also had to inform persons why they were coming to the respiratory hospital. And of course, while we were doing this at the level of the hospital, our parent ministry was doing a lot of media on ground, informing persons about isolation. And because there were different arms, you know, while we did hospital isolation, there was contact tracing being done by another department. There was testing being done by our lab at the hospital. And there was also what you call, so there's isolation, there's quarantine happening at the same time, and contact tracing. So you have testing, you have isolation, you have contact tracing, you have quarantine. Different departments under the Ministry of Health, we had to work together while we were going through the first wave. We realized that we were getting more and more persons. So despite the fact that the government was saying, please wear your mask, and we were saying that via the media, we're trying to push this, wear your mask, social distance, hand hygiene. We had a lot of persons who were not doing that. A lot of St. Lucians believed that there was no COVID, persons were still complaining, and we had a lot of issues where persons were actually not adhering to what we are asking them to do at the level of the Ministry of Health. And then the numbers we realized of persons were going up, though they were not very ill, they were just having mild symptoms, and a lot of them were asymptomatic. We did realize that we're still trying to contain the spread. So then we realized that the numbers were increasing and we had to look for more space. Okay, so we had to make some changes internally at the level of the Department of Health and shift one of our departments. So then at this point, we actually had to shift our turning point or rehabilitation services to somewhere else. And we had to use turning point and make some structural changes to turning point to allow COVID-19 cases to be there. Now you have to be careful with COVID-19. The fact that I have COVID-19 as a patient and somebody else has COVID-19 doesn't mean that we have to be together very close, because I could be more infectious than you. And therefore, we need to separate ourselves still, despite the fact that I am with COVID-19 and you have COVID-19, we need to very well be separated. So then we had to take all of that in consideration, which means that the Victoria Hospital, that was a general hospital, we had to do structural changes to it to allow for separation of cases. So when you come to the hospital, initially you would be called a suspect case. But when we do your PCR and we get your results, which is a confirmatory test, then at that point we will say you were positive or negative. Of course, treatment would have started if you needed treatment, but persons that were positive were kept at Victoria Hospital, and persons that needed to be transferred to another hospital because they needed admission, but they were negative, would send them to OKUH. Some individuals would want to go to Tapia because they're from the south. And some would go to Tapia because they wanted private care, and others would want to go to St. Jude's from the south. But it was important that we kept the separation of positive persons from going to the other hospitals and kept only sent persons that were negative there. So we went through and everything, and the government placed up the curfew. We had policies, we had regulations about churches, and all of these things were happening simultaneously about social gatherings, social distancing, and a lot of changes were being done out there about opening hours, working rotations. And I mean, we all here, we're leaving St. Lucia, so you could well imagine the dynamics had changed a lot because things were changing because of COVID. But as time went, I think we had points where people were still intermingling. They were still intermingling. The mask wearing was not what it's supposed to be. Even though our numbers had dropped nicely, persons still felt, for some reason, some persons still felt, that we could have intermingled. We're safe in St. Lucia. Nobody's really dying. Everybody's okay. And unfortunately, while some of us were actually pushing, some persons may still have had that mindset. The intermingling was still there. And what happened after a while is that we realized we were going up to, a second wave. And as the second wave moved up, we realized that cases were coming more ill. So it wasn't the first wave that we were going through where persons were just asymptomatic or had mild flu-like symptoms. We were actually getting persons that are really ill until we got our first death. I think sometime the 10th of November, if I remember clearly, we got one death in the morning, in the mid-morning or mid-afternoon, and in the evening we got another death. And then we had a lot more people coming in ill. And then we said we were in a second wave. We were in a second wave where even our staff started falling ill. And then we have a problem because human resources is always an issue. And even now in the pandemic, and now you have staff falling ill, you can't make them come to work. You have persons in contact with positive cases. So you have to start developing protocols and guidelines on who's supposed to come to work. And while we were telling persons that if you were in contact with a positive case, you need to be in quarantine for 14 days. Can you well imagine me telling our staff, you need to go home for 14 days because you're in contact with another staff? Because if we did that, then the whole hospital and everywhere would close down because you're in contact with a positive staff or you're in contact with a positive patient, and you could well imagine how difficult it was. We had to have PPE. We had to teach people how to don and off. Don means putting on the PPE. Off means taking it out. We had increased ICU needs because people were getting very ill, and we had persons reaching in ICU. We had to, our contractor who was doing the reconfiguration or the reconstruction of Victoria Hospital had to move quickly. We placed him under a lot of pressure because persons were coming in. So we had to move ICU from a 3-bed unit and add an extension of what we call a high dependency unit, which is just a step down from ICU, and put 12 more beds there because persons were coming very ill. And so persons were coming in, needing oxygen, needing more of our resources, medication being needed. Persons were coming in very ill, COPD cases coming in, asthmatic cases coming in, elderly people coming, and the deaths start happening. And we said, wow, this is a second wave. We need to ride it. And the testing was a lot of stress on the testing. The results were not coming out as we wanted it because we had a lot more to do. And so we saw a surge, and we were in the second wave, and this wave keeps on going, and it kept on going. And we, at this point, when I speak to you, we are not out of the wave as yet, because we're still having sick persons coming in. We're still having deaths, as you know, if you follow in the media. We cannot say safely that the wave has disappeared. We're still riding the wave. But other things are happening. Vaccination. So guess what? We brought in the vaccine, the AstraZeneca. And we're trying, and we said, okay, we get the vaccines and let's do the necessaries. But then guess what? Persons are starting to, we want persons to take the vaccines. We've been educating people, but people are a bit sensitive. Should I take the vaccine? I want to wait, I'm going to see what's happening with other persons. So then you're not getting the take-up of vaccination as you want to. And then can you ethically force somebody to be vaccinated? And these are things we have to deal with, because now we want persons to be vaccinated, but some are taking it, some are saying, no, let me wait, I'm afraid, I'm not going to take it. And then you have other things coming up, But at the same time, we need to continue working as healthcare workers. And we started introducing, because there was, should you put in the antigen rapid testing? If we bring in antigen rapid testing, what's its usage? And so therefore we brought it in. And we had to know what's its role in bringing in the clinical care of patients. And so if you're going to be using it, you have to know how to interpret it. What does it mean? What else you look at when you use it? Okay, so these are all of the things we had to make changes to protocols to allow that. We had to do a lot of work because we have a lot of things happening both internally and externally. And we had to work as a team. Mind you, the healthcare workers can't work alone without our firemen, who I want to thank so much for their pre-hospital care, without our police officers that have to enforce certain rules and to be doing certain things to guard us, And I mean, you have Nemo always being there. We have persons who have come in and made donations. Some hotels have donated bedsheets and linen. We have persons who are simple as seamstresses. They have decided to make masks, to just donate masks. We have farmers who have dropped in food to say, feed the staff. We have restaurants who have come in and say, I will feed the staff today at respiratory. How many do you have? I'll provide lunch. I mean, we've had persons coming of all different ranks and stature, trying to assist in whatever way they can. And I am telling you, this for me says, we have a lot of good people still in Tenucha, and they still want to come and assist, despite all the pressures we're having and everything you're hearing, because it's very difficult to continue moving and motivating the staff if you have so much pressure and so much media. So much time people get your media, negative press, sometimes persons complaining, you have patients complaining, sometimes with reason as well. So whenever a patient complains, you need to look at your processes and see what you could do to improve the processes. But at the same time, you need to motivate your staff because some of them are falling ill. They have not seen their family for more than a year or about a year because they're working in COVID and they're not seeing their family because we have them somewhere else living. So these are things we have to deal with because the counseling, the stress, the deaths, and you're hearing it. So you're seeing it, you're hearing it, you're living it, and you're a bit depressed because you're in a hospital that you've been and you have not moved to the new one. So you sort of split and separated from your colleagues, and yet you have to rotate the same individuals between the two hospitals at times, at different times. So it's been a lot. But we had to do what we had to do. We had to sometimes taper down services at the OKUH, which we have to do to be able to shift the staff to come and help at respiratory. Taper it down, because you can't continue running how you want 100% on one end if you need the staff to come and assist on the other end. So these are some of the things that we had to do. We also had to keep our eyes, burnt, and I myself had to keep my eyes on, start making sure that other areas like mental wellness center too, they too have their protocol and the infection control measures. Because any institution that houses persons that are long stay, like you may have a mental wellness that might have patients for a long period of time who are in there, mentally ill, and other areas, our homes, our elderly homes, prisons, these areas, you have to keep them isolated. But once you get infected, it tends to spread a bit more because persons are very close to each other. So these are all things that the Ministry of Health had to look at, and we as a hospital had to be monitoring to ensure that we can cope with any persons coming in. But all in all, sisters, one thing I could tell you is that what I have learned and what I continue to learn, I don't think you could learn that in any management book. I mean, this is a learning experience that I consider a great learning experience. And I empathize with all family members who have lost their loved ones. But I think this is something we need to journal. This is something we need to create a roadmap, because maybe in another 100 years, our offsprings or our solutions to come would have a roadmap. I would have a journal to guide them. You can tweak it because things are different, but to guide them, because this have forced so many changes, our families coming, not being able to see their loved ones. What do? We have to do a help desk. We have to bring in different cadre of staff. They can't deliver the food. We have to bring in more porters. We have to train the porters. We need to make them run the oxygen. They need how to do the oxygen. There's a lot of different things that we never thought we need. But as time evolved, we had to be thinking out of the box and saw how important information technology was more than anything else in this era. So I thank God that none of my staff has passed away. I do not know if I will say that tomorrow. I do not know if I'm going to say that next month. But I thank God that up to a day like today, we have not lost any one of our staff members. And I am not only talking about my physicians and my radio technicians and my pharmacists and the nurses. I'm talking about my porters and my domestics who are not clinical people, but they put on the mask because you train them to, and they go put on the PPE and they go in there and clean. They go in there and assist, and I want to thank God for all of those that can be on the front line. They're making sacrifices despite everything else. And I just want you sisters to keep us in prayer and keep them in prayer, because these are the true unspoken heroes. They are there working tirelessly, and I just want to recognize them. Maybe it's just, I don't know, if I just feel that I need to recognize them in whatever forum, because it's not about me, it's about my team, it's about God. And I think God is using me, and I've been through the test. I've been placed through the test, not only mentally, physically, spiritually. I think I'm going through the test, but I think at the end of the day, what doesn't break you make you stronger, as we see. And I want to thank God for giving me that experience to be alive in a pandemic, so that I could sit here and tell you what we're doing and what we're going through. And I thank you for that, sis.
Wow. Dr. Eugene, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I don't know what else to say. That is quite an experience. And honestly, if you've kind of given it to us in a nutshell, and I'm sure there's a lot more detail. And one of the first things I heard you mention that really touched me, because I have family members actually who are in the medical field, and two of them are very young, and they returned to St. Lucia as very young doctors to do their internship around October of 2019. And then come February, March, they're there at VH at the respiratory clinic, PPE'd, and having to deal with this. Very young, they're not even quite doctors yet, they're still interns. And I know it was very challenging for them. And you're right, I also understood that they had to stay in separate quarters, they couldn't go home because they're now every day dealing, especially when the second phase came in. So I know they were not able to go home. And they're quite young doctors who are not yet able to really enjoy or to, understand what their role will be. And here they are having to jump in with both feet. So my question to you, Dr. Eugene, would be, you spoke about the fear that went through all your staff and so on. How did you, in particular, what did you do to help them, to support them to overcome that type of fear?
So one of the things we try to give, this is our counseling services, but more than a counselor, Sister Tulia, I'll tell you what, I think that I have such a rapport with my doctors, and I'm talking about the doctors. I can't talk too much about the nurses because they are cadre of staff that are supervised by the nursing director. Although clinically, I'm overhearing, I'm sparing in everything, but I could tell you in the physicians that that are working there, I think it's a lot of them you have to, because they are very, very what we call humble, but they are strong and brave individuals by nature. And they are aware that, listen, this is our ward. This is not Ministry of Education. This is not Ministry of Home Affairs. This is a health sector issue that all the other departments can come on board, but we need to spearhead it. So I think a lot has to do with their own personality. Secondly, I do a lot of motivation with them. I motivate and I push. And I think the reason why I can do that because of, first of all, my relationship with God. And secondly, I know what it is to be in that kind of situation. And if you, as the medical director, you cannot be strong enough to motivate your staff, then your staff is going to have a problem. You have to be there with them. You have to start looking on the bright side. And I know some persons have fear, because imagine you would probably say, we can do it, but yet the international news would say X number of persons has passed away, X number of staff and nurse passed away, a doctor passed away. Obviously, you go in against this and you have to be there. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot has to do with the personalities. Mind you, the younger physicians are more to get, they like the challenge. So while the others that are more experienced may pull away a bit, you'd be surprised the younger ones are coming in, and they're coming in full force. You understand? And there's like, this is our era and we're taking charge of it. And not only the doctors and the nurses, I think I could say the same thing for the domestics that are probably younger and the porters that are younger. I don't know, but it's like we're working together as a team. So despite the fact that we're trying to get the counselors on board with them, to talk to them and to have them on speed dial if needed. And I think one of the things we really push for is persons need to have a close relationship with God. And I try to push that for my staff. I think almost all my meetings I've started, I always say, let's start with a word of prayer. If you keep God in the equation and you keep on pushing it, I think that is a big plus that you don't even see written down, but it's a big plus. So I think I'll have to do the personalities, because I've looked at the personalities of some of my persons on ground, and they are bold, they are brave, and they will put on the PP and they'll do what they have to do and they'll take control. And they're young, but they will do it. And usually what happens is that you would probably not let the older doctors with comorbidities to go in there unless they really have to, because you have to watch all of this as well. The younger ones, they don't have comorbidities, they're healthier, they could probably fight COVID faster and better than somebody with comorbidities. But I think this is the era. So your family members are probably just come out and they just finished. They're in the battle and you see them, they're normal because they're on board and They put on their suits like astronauts and they're ready to go, And of course, they have fear too. And maybe because they're junior, they will not say, Doc, I don't want to be there. I don't have a choice. But I think they have brave people. I think we have brave young people, brave young physicians, young nurses. We have brave ones. We have to have senior ones for supervision there, and that's important. The senior ones have to be there to supervise them as well. But I think also a lot of them have a very good relationship with God. I could tell you that, from the statements they make, from the interacting with me, and they're very close as a team too. You're close. If you're a team, you work in teams. It's easier when you work in team. You don't feel alone. I think all of these things contributed to their ability and to deal with the fear, which is still there, and the anxiety. But I think they're pushing along. The results show that, hey, none of our staff members have passed away. We're doing something good, we're keeping ourselves going. So I think that too, the results to push them forward and see we can continue doing it. We're riding the wave. We did the first one, let's ride the second one. I think that's what's pushing them to continue despite their fear. They keep on.
Mm-hmm. Ladies, if you have any questions, please just put them in the chat. Dr. Eugene will be only too happy to address any concerns or any questions you may have. You heard her mention the vaccine and people's reluctance to take the vaccine. She may not have all the answers, but we have her here right now. So any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. Sister Jacquie, any questions?
And let me just say that Sister Agnes is expressing what is on all of our hearts. She says from Facebook that she just wants to thank you, Dr. Eugene, for a job well done. And she really is expressing all of our sentiments. We truly thank God for you and for that tireless dedication, The word says that we must work without ceasing, pray without ceasing. That's what you're doing. You're steadfast, immovable, and always abounding in the work of the Lord. So we thank you really for what you've been doing, and may God continue to bless and strengthen you.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And I just want to add, we likened you to Deborah, the only female judge. And other things that we realize about Deborah is that she stood out because she possessed both spiritual leadership as well as civil leadership. And in your case, you've got that spiritual leadership because you're saying you start your sessions with prayer. You've recognized the persons that you work with, who they are, and that they have a faith in God. And that's excellent. And of course, your leadership across all those medical facilities, that in itself is quite a task. So without even knowing that your middle name was Deborah, when we likened you, we realized also that there are a number of women actually in leading roles within our medical field in St. Lucia, within the ministry, etc. So we're so honored, Dr. Eugene, to have you as one of us. You're one of our Kiwi leaders, and we are so blessed to have you. The other thing I thought of when we were speaking of Deborah is that she is also an example of a woman with faith in God who looks after her people, and that goes without saying. You not only look after your people because you're a doctor, but I don't think there's ever been a time since Kiwi North started that I've called on Dr. Eugene to do something. I don't know how she does it, how she fits it in, without, even if it's just a comment here or there, that she would participate. Dr. Eugene will always have a comment, an encouragement, something to contribute. So again, very strong, so many of the characteristics of this Proverbs 31 woman, this virtuous woman, Dr. Eugene, the courage it takes, and that reminds us also how God can really accomplish great things if you're willing to obey. If you're willing to obey God, He will accomplish great things. And I have no doubt that you have gone through this whole COVID experience because of your faith in God, because you have chosen to obey Him and bring those together, you talk about your teams being, working well together. And I have no doubt that it also comes from your leadership and your guidance. And we know when the Holy Spirit is present, anything and everything is possible. So we really do know, we laud you for that and we applaud you for that. I do want to ask another question though, in terms of your staff, and I know we have Sister Marilyn Marshall on here as well. Okay, before I say anything, we have a question here from Sister Lyra Pascal on YouTube. And Sister Pascal would like you, Doc, to explain the concept of herd immunity for the benefit of some of the listeners. Herd immunity.
And right after that, Dr. Eugene, I have two questions from Facebook.
Okay, so just to answer Sister Pascal's question about herd immunity, let me see if I can make it as simple as possible. We encourage everybody to vaccinate. Vaccines have not been something new. I mean, most of us here, I think everybody here online would have gone through the period of being vaccinated when they were younger. Mom used to bring to the health center or to the private physicians, and sometimes in the primary school and secondary school would take the line to be vaccinated. But there's a situation where we have persons who would not get vaccinated. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it because family members don't want them to do it for whatever religious reasons, their own reasons, they will not be vaccinated. But these individuals, what happened is that because so many persons have it, you get immune because of the herd being immune. So if you have 10 children, for instance, in a classroom, you may have one child, for instance, whose parents would tell you, I don't want to vaccinate my child. Now, I maybe Ministry of a school is probably not the best example to use, seeing that I think Ministry of Education, one of the prerequisites for entering school is your child being vaccinated or showing your vaccine card. But I'm just going to use that example so that persons can understand. Say I have 10 persons in the room or 10 children in the room, and I've been asking persons to get vaccinated, and we have 9 who's vaccinated, and you have one who insists they don't want to get vaccinated. That person would get vaccinated because the herd around them, persons around them, got vaccinated. So that's what you call a herd immunity. You included, you get immune because the people around you got vaccinated. Understood? So you may be hearing the word herd immunity a lot because we started vaccinating persons, and we know some persons will not take the vaccine, but the hope is to have sufficient persons vaccinated so that we can create a herd immunity. So the 1 or 2 persons who don't get vaccinated, they'll be protected because the others did receive the vaccine. So that is where herd, the crowd, comes from. Immunity from the crowd, which is the herd.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Eugene. So Sharon Love is asking, when you take the vaccine, is it still possible to get the virus? And can you get it twice?
The thing about the vaccine, you have different kinds of vaccines being produced now. You have AstraZeneca, you have Moderna, you have Pfizer, you have Johnson & Johnson. You have different vaccines coming out. The thing about it is that we're still doing a lot of research on COVID-19. I must admit to you, a lot of research on COVID-19 that sometimes you would hear certain things, some information out now, and later you'd probably hear something different from all organization. I could tell you that if you get COVID once, like some individuals did get COVID, they actually got reinfected again. And I'm talking away from the vaccine. You got COVID once today, and in the next round, they got COVID in the first wave, and they got COVID again in the second wave, which means that you would think that they got natural immunity, but they didn't because they got reinfected second round. And the thing about this vaccine, it's like the flu shot. You may very well get the flu shot this year, but next year you need to take another flu shot. Understood? So if you take the vaccine now, there's no guarantee that there's not going to have another strain that you may have to take another type of vaccine. I want persons to be clear about that. Because if you know about, I want to equate it to some degree to the flu shot, I might take the flu shot in 2019, but I have to take it again in 2021. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, which means that if I took it in 2019, I have to take it in 2021 because the virus changes. And therefore, I have to revaccinate regularly. So the COVID-19 vaccine would have to pretty much equate itself like that of the flu shot that when you get the vaccine, another strain can come out and you may have to revaccinate again. Yeah, I don't know if that's clarifies it a bit for persons.
I do believe that's clear. Thank you very much, Dr. Eugene.
I've got some more questions here from Lucy Blondell, who I believe lives in the US. And the question is, when I take the vaccine, do I still have to quarantine when I visit again?
Okay. So first I want to say thank you for Lucy. Lucy was here in St. Lucia recently. So I know she's back because she's been communicating with me. Yes, if you take the vaccine in St. Lucia, you take it and they come down, we're still asking people to quarantine because you may be protected by the vaccine, but it mightn't mean that you would prevent you may still end up infecting other persons. Yeah, because that's how the vaccine, you may be protecting yourself to some extent, yourself from getting COVID, but you may very well be still infecting others. And right now, that is why you're hearing countries are telling you, even though you get, St. Lucia, for instance, will tell you, even though you get vaccinated, you still have to get the quarantine when you come down to St. Lucia. Remember, COVID-19 is a new vaccine and we have to be very careful. Information is coming out on the vaccine. So I think what we're doing is trying to be as safe as possible. So vaccination doesn't mean, oh my God, I'm vaccinated, I'm not doing anything else. It's just another layer of protection. You still have to wear your mask, you still have to wash your hands, you still have to social distance. You're vaccinating, that's a good thing. So we still put it as another layer of protection and not necessarily like some persons would do, oh, I'm vaccinated, I've gotten my second dose, I'm out, I'm free. No, you know, you need to continue doing everything else and the vaccine is an additional layer. So that's what I would advise persons to do. And that is what St. Lucia is doing actually. When you come down, you still have to quarantine until otherwise advised.
Right. Thank you, Doc. We've got another question here from Sister Adela. And Sister Adela wants to know, are there any immediate effects from the vaccine? For example, swelling, hives, nausea, especially if you have a non-communicable disease.
Okay, so far our immunization unit at the Ministry of Health was responsible for ensuring that as many persons get vaccinated. They've been following up on the symptoms of persons who are vaccinated. They've been following up on us on, you know, what are some of the symptoms. What persons are more complaining, the common symptoms you'd hear is, I felt a bit of fever, joint ache, and chills. Some individuals will tell you, I felt nothing. Others will tell you, I had a headache. Yeah. But what we use it is AstraZeneca, and it's pretty much a safe vaccine used in other countries. Of course, you may have different views on the use, but so far in St. Lucia, the persons we've given the AstraZeneca to, we haven't had anybody who have reached the point where they have to be hospitalized. We haven't had any death as yet. And I just want to say, I know persons are concerned because we have elderly persons we want to vaccinate because these are people that are being affected and are actually dying away. And we have persons with chronic non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, cancer, epilepsy, sickle cell. We have other persons with other diseases. And you realize that individuals really want to know, should I be able to take it? So they're concerned, and that's valid. You're concerned. But so far, to the Sister Della who asked, we're looking at persons we've vaccinated so far, and majority of the persons, they're saying they're okay. And those that complained of symptoms are complaining of symptoms such as feeling chills in the night, some fever. In some cases, they will tell you they have some joint ache, headache, and persons will say to themselves, they feel a bit tired. That is what we're chiefly hearing from our nurses who have been vaccinating people and getting feedback from persons. Yeah, but of course, we're doing wider community vaccination now. You may have noticed that flyers going around to tell persons where to vaccinate in the nearest primary healthcare facility or other areas earmarked by the government of St. Lucia Ministry of Health. So we would get with time, more information But that doesn't mean that we're going to deter persons and say, you know, don't vaccinate until we get all the information. But of course, we would be able to get more information on, you know, if you have other symptoms. But so far, what we're getting is nothing at all, mild chills, fever, headache. You know, some persons will complain of some pain to the area of the site, but we haven't had anything that has been so bad that you have to have persons being treated to being admitted or needing ICU. Thankfully, we haven't gotten ever to that point with the AstraZeneca.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Doc. And as you said, I do remember us growing up in the UK, and my mother had 5 of us, and all 5 of us took all the vaccines that were there. But my dear sister seemed to be the one who always had some kind of reaction. You know, everybody else was fine. And even as a baby, you know, babies go for their jabs. Some of them are fine. Some of them burn up with fever. Some of them will have a reaction on the site. So that is the nature of vaccines, as you say. Some people will have absolutely no reaction. And this is, I'm not just saying this off the top of my head. This is actual what I have experienced. I do remember my daughter taking one injection when she was about 3 months old in England. She's a May born, so at 3 months, it was the height of the summer, very hot. There's no air conditioning or anything. And I felt she had a fever, and I kept calling the doctor. And he said to me, no, it's not a fever, just keep her cool, and so on. It's just a reaction to the vaccine. And yeah, by the following day, keeping her cool and so on, she was fine. So, you know, the vaccine phobia is something that is serious. And, you know, we're really grateful again that you're here and that you can break it down for us. But Lucy Blondell says, thanks much for the response. But quarantine again? We have some more questions. We have 2 questions here now. Just probably give you both because they kind of, you can probably answer them at the same time. So Lucille Cadet wants to know, if I don't have COVID-19, why should I take the vaccine? And Sister Lyra wants to know, will people who test positive be given the vaccine? Yeah. So if I don't have it, why should I take the vaccine? And if I test positive, will I be given the vaccine?
The first question is, if I don't have COVID-19, remember, vaccines are preventative. Yeah, they're preventative. It's a preventative measure. So I would take the vaccine to prevent me from getting COVID, the strain of COVID that's circulating. That's why you take vaccines, you know, because vaccines are supposed to allow you to get what you call acquired immunity, you know. So if you get sick, your body fights it. You have what you call natural immunity. You acquire natural immunity, you're supposed to. But if you get the vaccine, you would expect to get what you call, after your body will fight whatever the vaccine is in the vaccine. So you have what you call acquired immunity. So it is advisable that basically, if you don't have it, it is best that you take it so that you don't get to the point where you get infected naturally. You would have prepared yourself. So you would probably go through the COVID-19 or whatever strain that's circulating, and you'll be able to face it without worried about getting sick, okay? And I just want to put a pin in there and say to persons, some persons have the COVID-19 virus and they may be asymptomatic, but they carry it as carriers, and they infect others that have comorbidities or the elderly. And that is why persons are saying, but mommy or daddy, they don't go out, they're always in the house, granny always in the house, and how granny have COVID? Because somebody brought it from outside and gave it to them. The person probably is not even aware of it, but they brought it into them. So if you don't have it, you need to take it to protect yourself, but also to protect your other family members you're going to be around who may very well get it. You understand? So if I know that my mother and my father are elderly and unwell, I don't want to get it and then infect them. I'd rather do the necessaries to get my vaccine, let my body fight and get my little fever or chills. If I do get it, I may not get that at all. And then try to be able to have that immunity so that when I move around, I'm strong enough so that I could take care of other persons, and probably to some extent still using my mask, still washing my hands, still doing social distancing, of course, but I have the additional layer of protection so that I help myself, but I help others, loved ones around me. If you're positive, why take it? I'll tell you what, Sister Pascal, we've had persons that ask the same questions. For instance, I have a few of my staff who got COVID-19. I say, Doc, why take it again? From what World Health Organization is advising and from other literatures, you have an option to take it if you want. You know, if you're actually sick right now with COVID, I wouldn't advise you take a vaccine if you're sick right now. If you're actually sick right now with COVID and you're fighting COVID, I wouldn't ask you to put an additional load of COVID into your system by getting a vaccine. But if you know you have COVID already and you've had it and you've gone through it, like some of my staff, it will still advise them if they want, they could take it. You know, it's optional from what the literature is saying. You can take it maybe a few months afterwards. Those that have taken it, they've been quite okay. They haven't shown any issues. They have the same side effects like anybody else who would expect to have it. None at all, or maybe chills or fever. But we don't push persons to take the vaccine. If you already got COVID-19 and you want to take the vaccine later on, we tell you go ahead and take it, you know, but we advise and we encourage those who didn't get COVID-19 to take it, please, because it's an additional layer of protection. And when you do take it, you actually not only protect yourself, but you can also cut down the taking the vaccine along with the other barriers of washing hands and hand hygiene, social distancing and mask, you can prevent a spread and save somebody else's life. So literature is coming out. You know, if I had it, why not take it? Why take it again? But you have some persons that tell you, go ahead and take it a few months later. We're not going to push you against that if you had it already.
Thank you, Doc. Any questions on your side, Jackie?
Yes. Alicia Baptiste is asking, is it safe for a pregnant woman to take the vaccine? And I think you just answered the second question that she had, which was how long after being diagnosed with COVID-19 should one receive the vaccine?
Okay, so the women that are pregnant, we don't really push them to take the vaccine. As I told you, it's a new virus and a lot of studies are still being done on COVID-19. I'm just going to inform persons, the reason why I'm saying that pregnancy is a physiological stage. You're not sick, but at the same time, you're not 100% well, because you have another fetus, you have another baby in you, a human being, sorry. So we try very carefully. First far that I could tell you, we're not pushing our pregnant women to take the vaccine. If that changes, we will certainly let you know, because the Ministry of Health will advise persons who are pregnant, and we would like to give it in our antenatal clinics, and we'll let the women in our antenatal clinics know they can take it. But the women that are pregnant for now that I'm aware of, I don't know if tomorrow or day after something else might come out under WHO. We're really not pushing them to take the vaccine, because it's something that we are looking at and we're still studying. Sister Baptiste, just after, as I mentioned earlier, if you're positive, we had a few positive staff. They will query whether she take it or not. We didn't really force them to take it, because from what we're reading, to take it a bit later. You don't have to take it now. If you can opt to leave it for later on, a few months later, or some persons may not opt to not take it at all because they feel they were acquired, or sorry, they have what natural immunity. So cases like that, we tend to not push them. We let them read up on it. Those that are positive, and the pregnant women, we don't push them because there's a lot of research still going on COVID-19, and we rather not tamper too much with a woman who is carrying a fetus within. Yeah, so people like that, we encourage them to wear your mask, social distance, do the necessaries until we have COVID all figured out. Just let me just say something, Sister Tulia and Jackie and the rest. The thing about COVID is that it is such a strange virus that initially we were saying, it was respiratory symptoms. Then you heard people starting to say, I cannot taste. And then you started hearing persons saying other things like, we had a few patients come in paralyzed. They stopped feeling their feet and they had ascending paralysis. So they could not move and they were coming on wheelchair, and the abdominal muscles could not do the necessaries to peristalsis to make the abdomen and the food get digested. Then they couldn't breathe. We had to intubate them. So that's another phase of COVID that we didn't see coming. And then guess what? We had a few patients coming in and they were destroying things like psychiatric patients that we had to call a psychiatrist. But because of the oxygen level going to their brain that was so low, because of COVID lung disease. They were getting pneumonia because of COVID and the amount of oxygen going to their brain. We had a few cases that were destroying and they were mashing up things and they were acting like they were psych patients and they had no history of any mental disorder before. Then it is because that disease produces clots and it thickens the blood. What happens? We have persons coming with clots to their legs, people with clots to their lungs, pulmonary embolus. People with clots to their heart, we had more heart attacks. People with clots to their brains, we had more strokes, more than ever. And these are things, persons coming in different kinds of presentations. So you have people that are asymptomatic and you have those with mild colds, to those who are not facing anything, to those who are coming in paralyzed, those who are coming in with clots, heart attack and strokes and legs deep vein thrombosis and all different ways and persons mashing up stuff in one. So that tells you that you have to be on the ball with COVID because it's an evolving virus and information is coming out. So right now, you know, you have to watch and see all of it. We even have COVID toe. Persons have been discharged and they tell you my toe is hurting, is red, it's painful. And it's something called COVID toe. And of course, we have a lot of persons with pneumonia and a lot of persons with clot. So it's an evolving disease. And what happens, you're quite surprised that the information I'm giving you now, maybe by next week or week after next, you know, WHO will come up with a new stuff on something different. And you realize that, hey, instead of wearing X and Y, you have to do an additional layer of something else. So we're just trying to play it safe and be safe. And by telling persons, you know, forget the basics, hand hygiene, you know, social distance, you know, wear the mask, vaccinate if you have to vaccinate. Do what you have to do to put additional layers of protection because it's a new virus and you have to play it safe because persons are different, but we have to do what we have to do to protect our solutions. Yeah? So I hope I did answer because I don't have the answers to all the questions because it's a new virus, you know, and I myself a bit iffy because when I see things coming in, I say, oh my God, this is another kind of symptom that's coming and I did not see before because I'm seeing persons are coming in and they're destroying things and these people have never done that before. So we have a lot more things coming out. So we're looking at it. Persons are coming with different symptomatology.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot. We still have a few questions and it's already after 7. So let me just see if we can field these next few questions here. So Venetia Edwards says, good night all, but yes, but still you did not answer the question. With people with non-communicable diseases, can they take the vaccine with no complications?
Okay, let me just reiterate. Non-communicable diseases, you're looking at hypertension, diabetes, and everything that's not infectious. So I'm not looking at HIV, I'm not looking at tuberculosis, I'm looking at chronic non-communicable diseases or chronic non-infectious diseases. Can you take the vaccine? Yes, you can take the vaccine. You know, actually, what we plan to do in the ministry in the second round, we're trying to push for our elderly and our persons with communicable, non-communicable diseases to take the vaccine. As to whether you not have complications or not, I think Sister Tulia alluded to that. And so I think I am going to say the same thing. It varies. You know, you can take the vaccine and you have no issues at all. But somebody else could take the vaccine and develop a rash or have pain to the arms or swelling. Some other persons may have fever and headache and joint ache, and you know, others may. So far, thankfully, we have no one who has crashed and reached to the hospital in ICU. So I cannot tell you, sis, that if you take the vaccine, you will not have anything happen to you. You can have fever, you can have joint ache, you can have any of these things. You may not have anything at all. But what I could tell you is that it's a new disease, a new virus. And so far, the persons we have vaccinated, they have not gotten to the point where they've crashed and reached the hospital. Most of the symptoms are no symptoms at all from what they've been reporting, or some persons have had fever and chills, others have had headaches, others have had pain to the area of the injection site. Yeah, but we are encouraging, and this is the second round why we push it in the ministry. We are going to get to the point if we're not there as yet, because as I told you, there's a particular department under the Ministry of Health that deals with vaccination. But the aim is to vaccinate our elderly as well and our people with chronic non-communicable diseases. So we're encouraging these individuals to get vaccinated. Why? Right now, when I'm looking at my death status coming in St. Lucia and the persons that are dying at the hospital, when I look at what they have, a majority of them have diabetes, hypertension, kidney failure. They have chronic non-communicable diseases. And hence the thrust to encourage persons who have these diseases to kindly vaccinate so that you can protect or give yourself an added layer of protection so that you're not lost or you don't pass away like the persons who did not have that opportunity. Yeah, I know you're scared. That's why you're asking, but I'm just letting you know. I cannot tell if you're not gonna have anything gonna happen to you, but I could tell you from what we're seeing happening in other countries and what we're seeing so far in St. Lucia, AstraZeneca vaccine is safe enough. And thankfully, we haven't had anybody who have gone to the hospital, crashed and died because they took it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Any questions on your side, Jackie?
Not necessarily on my side, but I do have a question for Dr. Eugene.
Hold on. We still have three
you
here.
You still have? Okay, go ahead.
And then we'll come to yours, Jackie. Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
We have Brenda O'Geese who says, Doc, could you explain antibodies and how long after you recover can you still have them?
Antibodies is something that your body generates. You develop antibodies when you fight an infection, etc. It will vary from one disease to the next, and to some extent to persons to the other. What I could tell you, Brenda, is this particular, I guess you're talking about COVID-19. As I mentioned earlier on, if you get COVID-19 now, doesn't mean that you cannot get it again later. Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier on, I know of a particular case who got it in the first wave last year, and she got it again in this wave again this year. I could also tell you that we should take it like the flu shot, and that's how we look at it, because the fact that I got vaccinated for one strain, like the flu this year, doesn't mean next year I don't have to get the flu shot again. So the same would stand for COVID-19. To tell you if we had sufficient studies to tell you, I have not read on sufficient papers to say how long the immunity would last. Persons vary. Antigens are created or come out after you fight. When you fight an infection, you develop antibodies. Sorry, not antigen, you develop antibodies. But what I could tell you is that the fact that you get it now doesn't mean you're protected for a very long period of time. You may or you may not. So that is why it's a new illness and it's still under research. A lot of persons are studying, a lot of countries, developed countries are studying COVID, and a lot of persons are monitoring individuals with COVID. So my advice to you is this, that even if you take the vaccine or you got COVID itself and you developed antibodies because you got vaccinated, which is acquired immunity, and your body created some antibodies, or you got sick itself and you developed your own natural immunity, it doesn't mean that you're free to go out without mask or doing the necessaries, because you do not know you can get infected again. And you can get infected again. And that's why, like the flu shot, you need to get, you probably would have to get vaccinated every year. And that is the way we look at COVID-19. It's a situation we may have to get more than one vaccine for different strains. So you get vaccinated, you got COVID, still wear your mask. Continue wearing your mask and doing everything else. Yeah, it's a new disease. We're still studying it. There's a lot of things that are unclear, but a lot of things that we notice that we have to continue doing.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Agatha, I missed your question, but Sister Agatha wants to know, in case you have to travel, do you need to get the vaccination? Do we need to get a vaccine?
Okay, so the traveling part, a lot depends on what the airlines are asking now, huh? Because I'm hearing some airlines are pushing for you to actually be vaccinated before you board the flight now. Others are telling you you need to have your PCR, and depending on where you go, and you have some countries telling you just a rapid antigen will do. But coming from a clinical person, I'll tell you what, if I was traveling, I'll take my vaccines. I'll take my vaccines to have that added layer of protection. I would ensure I have my 2 doses. and have my added layer of protection. So even though the country tells me, you know, even though I go to a country and the country tells me, or the airline, remember the airline is very important. The airline, the carrier might tell you, you just need to show your PCR. But even though you do your PCR, or they might tell you just do a rapid to go to whatever island, I'm not sure, because it varies. You can go wrong by vaccinating yourself and getting your other tests you want done for you to enter the plane, board the plane, and then go to the country. So it varies. A lot of airlines are different. You know, I think what I'm hearing now, they may go to the point where persons might ask you to do your vaccines. Just like now, when you go to South America, they might ask you to have your yellow fever vaccine. Some countries might very well start telling you, you know, you need to have that before you come to the country. Some airlines would tell you you need to have it before you get an airline to be aboard the plane. Persons would put different things in place for the country and for the private sector business. But if I was a traveler, like I tell all travelers, get your 2 doses of your vaccines as you're supposed to. Way before you travel, try to get it so in case you don't get sick on the flight. In other words, if I'm traveling this afternoon, I'll try to not take my vaccine this morning or tomorrow. I'd give me enough time. So if I have any fever or any headache, any joint ache, I would have gone through this for me to travel nicely. And then any other things that they ask me for my PCR and my antigen rapid test, I would have it. But at least I would have the added layer of being vaccinated before I travel. And that's my take on it as a physician.
Okay, I have got 3 more questions, and then I think we going to have to give Doc a chance. So, Sister Katie wants to know, what is the reason for having 2 doses?
Okay, so vaccines, Sister Katie, if you go back to when persons were going to school, some vaccines are 1 shot and others, they have split it in doses. I would like to think, I can't tell you entirely off my head, but I will let you know that sometimes you have to look at the vaccine itself, and then you would probably want the person's body to recuperate, or to be able to create enough antibodies in a particular time period, so that you would give them a dose now, and then you split up the time and give them a second dose. Now, it all depends on the vaccine itself, because if you go back, I don't want to say it's what I'm telling you is I'm 100% off my head. I'm just telling you off clinically what I think, of course. Thank you for asking me, and I'll probably go back and ask my epi people, you know. But I could tell you one thing is that some doses, when they prepare some vaccines, is a one dose. But if some of the vaccines, they'll tell you you have to do a booster shot, or you have to split it in 2. And a lot has to do with the fact that, you know, the content of the vaccine, and also giving the person receiving the vaccine enough time to recuperate from the first shot, so that they build a certain level of immunity, and then you give them another shot that they could actually do more coverage. So you have to look at the content of the vaccine. I think in the AstraZeneca, it's actually a glycoprotein, whereas some of the vaccines we've had before used to be attenuated forms of the virus. So you have to look at the content of the vaccine, and basically the persons that do the vaccines and the researchers that invent the vaccine, they will do it in such a way that it will allow the vaccine to work, allow your body to get enough immunity or develop antibodies, and then give you another shot so you can be able to deal with it. So I think that is a wide reason, the content, and to allow your bodies to develop a certain level of antibodies in good timing. Of course, I could look into it even more. Sister Tulia and Sister Jacquie, if you want, maybe later on in the wave, you could call me back and I could give you more information. By then, we'd have more feedback on the vaccination and the outcome of vaccinating persons, because I think a lot of questions are surging out there, and it's a new virus, and we have to do it in such a way that persons are careful on how much you put into the human body and how you do it, and the contents of the virus. And a lot of different things are coming out, the Pfizer virus, the AstraZeneca, the Moderna. So a lot of different. But if you want, you can call me later on some other time when we actually probably ride off the wave, and I could probably give you more in-depth information of the vaccine and the any complications on what we see coming out with COVID, because it's evolving.
Okay, great, thank you. So I've got this question again from Lucy Blondell, and then I have one other question. So Lucy Blondell says, for my 58 years on earth, I never get the flu. Yet, I take the flu shots every year. Should I continue taking it?
Most definitely, you should. You should keep on taking it, because the reason why they have a flu shot every year is because the flu changes, the virus changes. So what you had, the virus in 2018 is not the same in 2019 and not the same in 2020. So you should continue taking it, Sister Lucy Blondell. And I think maybe because you're taking it, you never had it for a long period of time. So it wouldn't hurt to take it. I think if you take it to give yourself some degree of protection, you should go ahead and take it.
Okay, thank you. And our last question comes from our own leader, speaking to another leader. Sister Charmaine would like to know. She says that, Doc, I listened to all you have said, but amidst all the demands of the job in these unprecedented times, how do you find that balance between the day-to-day demands and your self-care? Very good question.
Sister Charmaine, that's a very good question. Very good question. I'll tell you what, I have a very supportive husband. I have a very supportive husband who's very much into having what you call a balanced life. And I think if it wasn't for him, and God knows, I would probably tip on the other side, if I know what he's saying. He has been there with me. God has been there with me, first of all, and I thank God for that. And I think God has placed persons in my life, like my husband, who has made it possible for me to keep that balance. You know, with the amount of workload I have, I think it's nice to know when you get home, somebody is there to have done the laundry, prepared the meal, run the water bath, you know, and asked you how is your day at work, and done so many different things that as your days continue and your nights continue into work, you have that support to get other things done, you know, and to make sure that every other thing that you have to take care of, maybe your elderly parents, and they're there and they're part of it. So I could tell you, family is very important, and a relationship with God. And if I didn't have a strong family, supportive family, and I mean supportive and also a good relationship with God, I am telling you, I probably would have not been here today to talk about it, because it's a lot of stress. A lot is happening in the health sector, not only COVID, everything else that's happening, because diseases continue that were always there before COVID. So I have been able to keep that balance, Sister Charmaine, because my husband ensures that I keep the balance. And when he sees me not being able to remind me, take a break, let's do something else, you know, and I think you need this support in the family. I also have persons in my life that, you know, that are supportive, you know, they will call you and they will say a prayer for you, and they'll call you and ask you how it's doing, how you're doing. Even Sister Tools sometimes WhatsApp me, hi sis, how you doing, you know, and will take me away from, you know, and make me stop thinking about work alone and other things, you know. I think having supportive family and friends, and a very good relationship with God, you know, when you have God in your life, and there are times not even your family members that are human beings can assist you, but God. That's all that I could say, but God, you know. And I'm happy that I have a relationship with God. I think I have renewed strength every morning. Every morning I have renewed strength. Yeah, so I'm thankful for that. Despite the challenges, I'm happy for the experience. And I pray to God that we ride this wave safely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eugene, Sister Alicia. Just a few last words from me, Sister Jacquie, and then you'll pray over Sister Eugene, over Dr. Eugene, and we'll bring it to a close. So, ladies, just to sum up, the Bible is clear that God calls women to follow him and to lead his people. He did it then in the times of Deborah, and he still does it today. We are important to God. And we need to be faithful and to walk in his guidance. We need to lead well and to live strong lives in his promises of protection and faithfulness over our lives. And I just want to say, listening to our esteemed doctor, I heard so much about newness. COVID-19 brought so much newness to your life, to the medical field, all the changes that had to come about. I mean, when Sister Charmaine, brought the topic in and everything else she said, we never thought that we would have you sitting here, Sister Alicia, and telling us about the extent of the newness that you had to go through. And as you said, God is using me. Those were your words. And we're grateful and we're thankful that you're allowing him to use you. Because if you were not allowing him to use you, I believe that, as you said, you would not be where you are today, sitting here and sharing with us. So we're thankful and we're grateful. I mean, the ladies, you can see from the chats how much, the ladies have been very engaged. The sharing was great. And absolutely, at some stage, we'll have to bring you back to give us an update on the vaccine and anything else that we think will be relevant, because we are also aware that besides COVID, like you say, we've got all the other things going on with violent crimes and stabbings and shootings and everything else that's still going into the hospital. So that's for another show. But I would just like to call on Sister Jacquie right now, as I said, to release a prayer over over Sister Alicia, and then to bring the session to a close, please, Jacquie.
Yes, let's all pray, ladies. And thank you so much for those who came online, who contributed questions, and those questions really were well answered by Dr. Eugene, giving us a lot of clarity. So yes, we thank God for her, and let us pray. Father, we really thank you for you. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your transforming power at work in our lives through your Holy Spirit. And Lord, we lift up Dr. Eugene today, thanking you for her, Lord. Proverbs 31 says that the Proverbs 31 woman is clothed with strength and dignity. And we see that in Dr. Eugene, Lord. She has been strong, even though there's been extreme pressure put on her in her role. And she's always looked to you. The word dignity means worthy of honor and respect. And truly, this applies to Dr. Eugene. Father, we seek to honor her tonight before you. We're asking you to bless her, Lord, to continue to give her wisdom, strength, courage. We ask, Lord, that you bless her teams who have listened to her wise instruction and have really rallied around all that was required and all that needed to be done. We cover not only her and her dear husband, but also all the team in the blood of Jesus. We ask that you keep from them any harm or danger. We declare that no evil shall befall them, no harm shall come near their dwellings. And we declare also, Lord, that even as they've given themselves so willingly, so unstintingly, Lord, that you will pour out blessings upon them that they cannot contain. Father, again, we thank you for her. And we ask that you guide her at every moment in Jesus' mighty name. And bless all the ladies who are listening in and all the ladies of KWI and their families, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Sister Matthew, Tulia, Tools, and the rest of sisters, just give me 1 minute, because I'm a person, I want to ensure that persons leave with no doubts. Sister Katie did ask a question about why 2 doses. And I had the opportunity to just think about it as well. And I just want to say that and I want persons to leave with clarity. And I also verified as well with my immunization officer at Ministry of Health. Basically, it's important that we know that some vaccines the trials have shown, Sister Katie, that 2 doses provides greater immunity than 1. So some of our vaccines on our schedule, our immunization schedule in St. Lucia, you will notice that they only give you 1 shot, whereas some others, they will give you a booster. So in COVID-19 case, the reason why we're giving 2 doses is that the trials have shown that 2 doses provide more immunity than 1. I don't know if that answers your question clearly. It allows persons to build immunity, but it also means, after the second shot, you would have developed more immunity than just 1 alone. Okay? I don't know if it sort of clarifies. I don't like persons living with any uncertainty after I make a presentation or I discuss any topic. Sorry. And I also want to say thank you so much. Am I allowed to close now, or is there anything else to be said? I go ahead. I just want to thank you, Sister Tu, Sister Jacquie, Sister Charmaine, everybody else who's on board. I am sorry that I cannot join every single session because of the amount of work I had to do. I literally had to run through traffic to actually log on here. My phone has been beeping away. I guess afterwards I have to answer all the missed phone calls. None of them appear to be urgent. I hope not. But I just want to thank you, sisters. I think that sometimes persons may not see you as frontliners, but guess what? The backliners who pray for persons are very important. The persons behind the line. And I just want to let you all know that I know you all are praying. And I see, despite everything that's happening in St. Lucia, we have praying individuals. And I'm just encouraging you all, ladies, to keep the faith and continue praying. There's so many things that could be done now, and persons are depressed, jobs are being lost, persons are losing loved ones, a lot of different things are happening. But once we keep on praying and we keep that prayer going and keep our relationship with God, we're going to go through it and go through it well. So I just want to thank you all for inviting me. Feel free, Sister Tulia, don't worry, just WhatsApp me. If I'm busy, I'll still give you a response. You can re-invite me later in the year when I have more data on what's happening and we have more research and more solid on COVID. But thank you for the opportunity of sharing with the sisters. It also forces me to rethink and re-strategize and see the need of sharpening and fixing certain things internally as to the education we give out to the public because of the questions. We may have to send out more information to clear up certain doubts. So I thank you so much for this opportunity, and I wish all of you well and stay safe during this period of COVID-19. If anyone has any issues and has to come to the hospital, just check me. I'm willing and ready to help you. And I think that's my joy, to help those that are unwell. So I thank you so much, sis, for inviting me.
Thank you, Sister Eugene. Thank you, Dr. Eugene. And what more is there for us to say, ladies, except thank you all for your participation. And with that, we will log off for tonight, and we'll be back next Thursday for another journey into Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman. Thank you all. Have a good and peaceful night. God bless you all.
God bless you.